Hello and welcome back to Anglo Election Insights. I hope you're all doing really well. So, one of my more recent videos was focused on the relationship between the Teals and the Greens and how I thought the balance was shifting, perhaps in favour of the Teals. And I think what that video proved was a few things. One of them was that anytime you try to have a balanced conversation about the Greens, you're going to cop it both ways from either their supporters or their detractors, who basically want to hear that either nothing went wrong or that everything went wrong, and nothing in between. But also the other thing was, when talking about the Teals, I found that a lot of people seem to be under the impression that when you say the word teal, what you're referring to is the sort of 2022 style Teal, who these kind of political moderates that stormed the Liberal Party in their inner city metropolitan seats on these kind of like climate and integrity sort of platforms. But I think now in 2025, the word teal means a lot more. And if we're not kind of considering that Climate 200 as an organization can't just be sort of fit into this little ideological box that people want to put them in, then people are going to miss potentially some big shifts in political dynamics over the next term and beyond. So I want to clear some of that up and talk a little bit more exclusively about how I think the Teals have some really big opportunities moving forward. And it's mostly at the expense of the Labour Party. So let's dive in. Firstly, let's define what a Teal is. Now, you can define it however you like, but for my purposes, this is what I mean when I'm talking about Teals. So for me, a Teal is an independent candidate or MP who accepts donations from Climate 200, the organisation. So it's a very broad definition. It would include Helen Haynes and Andrew Wilkie, who were elected well before Climate 200 were any kind of a force in politics. Technically, it excludes Rebecca Sharkey, but if you want to lump her in there because her party's basically just a one-man army, then that's actually pretty cool with me. I'll probably refer back to her a little bit later in the video anyway. So I'm just hoping to dispel the notion that the Teal label only applies to those kind of 2022 style candidates. So let's have a look at the current seats held by Teals under my definition. There's 8 of them. So Clark and Indi, which have been held since 2010 and 2013 respectively. I say 2013 because, of course, Cathy McGowan first won the seat as an independent and then successfully completed a handover in 2019 to the current member Helen Haynes. So we can see here most of the seats were gained at the expense of the Liberals, particularly in later years. But what's interesting is that on a two-party preferred basis, 3 of them are actually notionally Labor seats, and a further 3 of them have become quite marginal in recent years, which a lot of people have basically suggested that the Teals will continue to encroach on Liberal territory and eventually the Liberal Party will just basically die as a result of Teals. But I don't really subscribe to that belief. I think over time, yes, in terms of the short and even medium term, the sitting Teals have made it very difficult for the Liberals to form a majority government or for the coalition to form a majority government. But over time, I think that problem is actually going to become increasingly Labor's as these notional two-party preferreds continue to trend towards the Labour Party. So then we've got some marginal seats. So this is where the Teal candidate came second in the two-candidate preferred. And you can see, Goldstein, which was won back by the Liberals. Then a couple of really close seats in Bean and Fremantle against Labour. And then we've got Flinders, Cowper-Wan and Groom-Farrer. So some more kind of regional seats. And you can see that the margins on two-party preferred get increasingly strong for the coalition. The Honourable Mentions. Now, these are 3 seats where the Teal candidate failed to make the count but they got very close to making the count, and the seat would have been very close had they done so. So in Fisher, I think Karen Jones almost would have won the seat if she'd made the count. Same thing in Forest with Sue Chapman. And then in Grey, I saw reporting, and the numbers kind of make sense, that if Anita Cuss made the count, she would have actually beaten the Liberal candidate. So definitely worth mentioning those three. So let's kind of have a bit of a deeper look at who the Teals actually are. I believe that they come in three sort of main flavours, if you will. So firstly, we've got the class of 2022. So these were your political moderates, generally women as well, or in this case exclusively women, who had a strong focus on both climate policy and integrity, which were seen as pain points in the tail end of the coalition government coming into 2022. And their goal was to come in, outpoll Labor and the Greens, and then ride their preferences home to unseat the sitting Liberals in your more kind of high-income, blue ribbon, Liberal-held seats that Labor were considered uncompetitive in. So they appealed to professional working women, your climate-conscious voters, moderates and disenchanted Liberals who were looking for someone else to park their vote with. And also, I've got community activists here. So that's people who perhaps have a really strong connection to certain local issues, and they felt that an independent candidate was a better vehicle for getting stuff done on that front than a major party, for example. So then the second sort of type of Teal candidate is more your regional candidate. So generally they have a pretty strong connection to the local area. Their background in a lot of cases was a little bit more left-leaning, but they tended to try and campaign on a very centrist platform, almost exclusively coalition-held seats, and they were looking to, again, siphon off some of that kind of centrist moderate vote, more climate-conscious voters in the regions. And particularly, I think what a lot of them did was try to grab hold of certain local issues and present themselves as like a community-driven alternative who will champion the local cause in Canberra rather than just toe the party line. And then finally, you have your more overtly progressive Teal candidates. Three of them pictured below here, particularly Peter George, I think fits that description. And they were looking to unite the progressive vote and hopefully leech off enough Liberal preferences to unseat the Labor MP. So again, they were chasing voters who, like, climate was a big part of their vote. But again, these local community issues, same thing as what I was just talking about, how like an independent candidate perhaps could be seen as a better alternative than a major party in terms of, getting something done for the local community in Canberra. So sort of getting back to this point about, what impact has this had on the Liberal Party? And you can see I've got two maps here of Sydney's North Shore and the eastern suburbs of Melbourne from 2016 through to 2025. Now in 2016, this marked probably a bit of a high point for the Liberals in terms of their kind of inner city blue ribbon vote. Under Turnbull, he was very popular, so you can see like eastern suburbs and the North Shore of Sydney did really well. And I think this was the year that they finally won Chisholm. They performed relatively strongly even in these outer eastern suburbs. And then obviously you look at 2025 when the Teals basically wiped out the Liberals on the North Shore, in the eastern suburbs, and in Melbourne, all of the heartland gone. Had they not scraped home in Goldstein, that map would look even worse. So I think what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that they've kind of done the damage. Like, there's not a huge amount of juice to squeeze out of the coalition, certainly following this strategy. In 2025, it was actually Labor who inflicted most of the damage on the Liberals. Some of the more higher profile regional Teals fell short despite, big campaigns. And They actually went backwards in Victoria in both Kooyong, and they lost Goldstein. And some of the swings that the Teals got towards them in places like Curtin or Sydney's North Shore were, not amazing, mostly within kind of 3%, even though, Labor was getting swings of sort of 5-6% plus in some of these metropolitan centres. So where else do they turn? I'm going to present here two types of seat where I think the Teals could make the most amount of gains and do the most amount of damage. The first one is in these more kind of progressive metropolitan areas. So rather than going for that kind of old money sort of seat that they've already won a handful of those, these are seats that are held by Labor, but ideally you've got a reasonably high Green vote and a Liberal vote that has a ceiling of maybe about 25-26%, so that an independent can easily clear both the Greens and the Liberals on primaries and hopefully soak up their preferences to ride them home. These seats are characterised by higher household income levels, a little bit higher density, highly educated electorates too, and a high proportion of professionals. But you want to hit the sweet spot where there's not too many public servants, such as in a seat like, say, Canberra. And also, you probably don't want too much in terms of diversity, because when you get into seats with, for instance, really high South Asian or Chinese Australian vote, it can be a little bit more difficult for a Teal independent to kind of penetrate into those communities. They are a much more natural fit for the Labor Party, who are able to sort of communicate to them a bit more effectively at the national level, particularly in this current sort of political environment as well. So I guess you're looking for a sort of progressive, but generally like affluent and more kind of Anglo electorates, rather than places like Eastern Melbourne, like Menzies, for example. They're probably not ideal in terms of the amount of Chinese vote there. And you can see how that played out in a place like Bradfield, where there is a high Chinese Australian population, and Labor actually polled about 20% and cut a fair way into what might have otherwise been Nicolette Buller's primary vote. And obviously that was the seat that they only just won by the skin of their teeth. So some examples include seats like Cooper, Boothby, Fremantle, Moreton, maybe Lilly in Brisbane, Sydney and Bean. So before you guys get up in arms and carrying on about how you live in these seats and there's no way that any of them would ever go Teal, just remember that these are like examples, like potential seats where something could happen. And it could happen like quite quickly or quite out of the blue. But yeah, there might be some like specific local factor that I'm not aware of that would kind of disqualify one of these seats. So don't jump down my throat on that one. Just trying to give some examples of what it might look like. And then the other type of seat that I think the Teals could have some success in is your retiree havens. But there's a specific type. So these are coalition-held seats generally. They sit on the periphery of capital cities, and they're very popular with retirees. So they sort of don't quite fit the description of rural, regional, or suburban. But like they have reasonable density, but still also with nice kind of like natural surroundings, but also good access to the capital cities and all of the services that retirees might want to need. So these electorates are characterised by high rates of outright home ownership, so these aren't mortgage-bailed at all. Ideally, you have strong local communities as well, so you don't want places like, say, the Gold Coast, where there's a lot of development and a lot of churn, a bit more diversity, not just in terms of like cultural and linguistic diversity, but like diversity of demographic as well. And you definitely don't want too much primary industry. So these more kind of regional seats like Braddon, like Cowper, like Wannon, they're not particularly tealish in that sense, that the older vote is a little bit more rusted onto the major parties. They're voting a little bit more out of economic interest. You're looking for these like touristy areas with lots of retirees who aren't under too much economic stress, but they are really invested in their local community, in their local surrounds, and they are open to like a climate-focused candidate who has that sort of NIMBY streak about them, I guess, and has strong community links, and is kind of willing to fight, developments or changes to the area on behalf of the residents. I think that could be like a particularly good selling point. So, for example, I've got some seats here, like in Flinders, for example. There was a lot of community opposition to AGL trying to set up shop with a gas terminal thing down at Crib Point or wherever it was. Those kinds of selling points could work really well. I've got Fisher as well, where the Sunshine Coast is definitely nowhere near as sort of developed as somewhere like the Gold Coast, so it probably has that slightly stronger sense of community. And then I've also got Forest down here in like the south coast of WA, or I should say it's more like the west coast, but at the southern end, where there's a lot of retirees and tourism and all of that, but at the same time there are pockets of alternative lifestyle communities as well. So Margaret River comes to mind, places like the Dandenong Ranges and Byron Bay, those kinds of places sort of can help Teal candidates as well. So I made like a little map. This is a pretty fun map, don't take it too seriously, which includes a few coalition flips, but then a lot of Teal seats cropping up, but also some Teal seats being lost. So in this scenario, I guess the Liberals kind of win back a little bit of their heartland off both Labor and the Teals, but Labor suffers a lot at the hands of the Teals. So seats, some of the aforementioned seats like Fisher, Bean, Flinders, Boothby, Fremantle, they all go. So in this scenario, I have the Liberals pretty much, or the coalition pretty much getting back to where they were, I think, without Dixon, Leichhardt, and a few other seats. Labor back to 75, so kind of really just back to where they were, and a bigger crossbench with quite a few Teals, and a couple of extra Greens from where we are now. So you can pause the video here and have a closer look if you like, but it's just a bit of fun, this map. Cool, so thanks for watching, guys. Leave your comments below. Let me know if you live in a seat that I didn't mention and you think there might be good potential for a Teal challenge. Let me know if you think, maybe the Teal movement is one that's going to really suffer due to the new electoral reforms in terms of funding campaigns, and whether or not this movement's basically going to run out of legs and peter out or not. But I thought it would be just worth clarifying what my opinion is on the Teals, that I think the label is actually a bit broader than what a lot of people do, and that there does exist an opportunity with the way federal Labor is trying to be very centrist on the environment, and probably leaving a lot of ideological room for more progressive Teal candidates. So thanks for watching again. Subscribe if you're new here. If you're enjoying the content, you'd like to see more, like the video if you enjoyed it. And as always, leave your comments below. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video.